Today is getting rusty and mossy and dirty and weathery. You wouldn't believe what 4 acrylic paints and a little bit of water can achieve. I'm kind of a snob when it comes to easy miniature painting, believing that most things can be achieved with mixing acrylic colors. And that's why I started with a thinned down version of burnt red through an airbrush after I primed the miniature black. Because of the thinner it goes into all the recesses to have that deep-seated rust effect right from the start. I paint all the mechanical parts and the trim, and yeah, honestly, most of the miniature apart from the armored shoulder bits. Because these were painted with dark sea blue, mainly applied from above. I could have done these 2 steps with a brush, but I'm very lazy this summer when it comes to painting. I mixed a tiny amount of wolf grey into the dark sea blue and highlighted the most raised areas of these shoulder parts, front armor as well as the knee-like joints. I repeated that process 2 times, always adding a little more wolf grey. Until he looked like a Sons of Horror Saturnine Dreadnought with a little more blue. But after that it was time for a brush, hot orange and water. I thinned down the paint so it flows nicely into all the recesses. This also emphasized the rust effect even more, making it look more convincing, especially the parts like the claw and the deepest recesses of the mechanical parts, as these areas would catch the most rust. After that I covered the entire trim with this orange, making me second guess myself and my decisions, but I as well have to trust the process here. Acrylics do darken down drastically, and this is exactly what I hope for. I went all over the trim with burnt red again in a dry brushing motion just to give it a little more variety. I applied Vallejo silver to all the mechanical parts, again in a dry brushing motion since I don't want to ruin the previous steps. This again looks really bright, I know, but it will darken down very soon. For the trim I used light bronze followed by Pro Acrylics copper, only touching the most raised parts, giving it this metallic shine. And when the metallic paints were completely dry, which is more or less the only time I really wait for the paint to dry out, I shaded the trim and all the mechanical bits with a very thin layer of Vallejo's Game Wash Black. I don't want to drench it with this paint, I only want to cover the areas to darken them down. And now that my Saturnine is darkened down, it's time to add more and more color to it. First, the ropes, which get a coat of Parasite Brown. I want them to stand out a little, and this very orangey or ochre-like brown works so well with the dark sea blue in my opinion. The seaweed first gets a base coating of dark green, and I once again used Parasite Brown to brighten it up and giving it this more lively-like look. Using the same paints for different parts of the miniature and mixing them with other already used paints will in most cases make the miniature look coherent, at least according to my experience. I'm not an arts teacher, please keep that in mind, this is sharing of experience. Apart from the armor and its trim, the 4 main paints I used here are burnt red, hot orange, Parasite Brown and dark green. I just mixed these colors into each other and added water here and there to create different effects, mostly with a stippling technique. Like here, I once again just dip my brush onto some places of my wet palette without even thinking too much and stipple the colors onto the armor and into the recesses. At this point I also added a brighter green in the form of yellow-green so I could stipple it onto the seaweed, making it look a little more fresher. And because it would look strange otherwise, I also applied to some areas of that armor, trying to tie it all together. I honestly just go with the flow, so to say, and do what feels about right. I have no greater philosophy about it. And now to the part I also dreaded a little. All these barnacles. I just base coated them with dark rust and went over them with a mix of dark rust and elfic flesh. First in a 50-50 mix, and after that I highlighted the, well, outer points of the shell with a pure elfic flesh. Such interesting little creatures, honestly. Small crustaceans that can anchor themselves to nearly everything. The animal kingdom never fails to amaze me. And while I had the elfic flesh on my palette, I went over the robe to highlight it. I also used the same elfic flesh, mixed it with dark sea blue and edge highlighted the armor. When doing these things, I only pick out some of the most important parts of the miniature, like the area around the head as well as the chest and maybe some small details. I usually don't edge highlight everything on a miniature, it is just not a pleasant part of painting for me, so I try to keep it to a minimum. But again, here is a pleasant part of painting for me, using water to thin down burnt red as well as hot orange and paint all over the molds and apply it, streaking on all these holes and such. I nearly forgot the lantern. I used a base coat of Parasite Brown again, followed by Elfic Flesh and a watered down sun yellow over the entire glass. For the eyes I just used Abyssal Turquoise, painted turquoise on the, well, cheeks and the eye lens itself, and finished the entire thing with a dot of pure white. I made the reactor look like it exploded, or was heavily damaged at least, and to match that I gave the unit and the area around it a coat of Vallejos black and dark rust. And to have another dark spot I painted the end of the thrusters with the same mixture. For the sand, which is AK Interactive's dry ground by the way, I used Vallejos Game Wash Sepia as a shade. And when that was dry, I went over the ground with AK Interactive's dry ground again, mixed with some earlier used colors like Parasite Brown and Light Green, because sand is not only sand on a beach. To create water, I wet blended Abyssal Turquoise with blue green and got brighter the closer I got to the shoreline. And to create that water effect, I used my trusted AK Interactive's Still Water. And with that done, I called the miniature done. Sorry for this video took a little bit longer. Someone was too lazy to record this voiceover, and also this someone sunk really deep into a rabbit hole of updating his entire Slaves to Darkness force, which is about 10,000 points. I have no idea what happened there. But I hope this video brought you some entertainment and maybe some ideas and the wish to mix some colors to create cool stuff. And with that said, thank you for watching, leave a like, maybe a subscription, check out my channel membership or Patreon if you feel like supporting this channel. Regardless, thank you for your time and we are going to see each other in the next one.